Why is it that despite being the world's largest oil producer, the United States still cannot fully use its own oil? It's just like a person who grows wheat on his own land, yet has to depend on others to meet his own needs. The world we live in, what we see, is often the opposite of reality. In the same way, millions of containers go from China to the United States every year, but why are many of them thrown away there? And in the middle of all this, how and why does Iran smuggle Boeing 777 aircraft? Once again, welcome to Noble's Creation.
Viewers, do you know that at any given time, around 300,000 ships are present in the oceans? These include oil tankers, LPG and LNG carriers, tugboats, passenger ships, and also those ships that keep the wheels of the global economy turning, container ships. About 90% of global trade moves through sea routes. According to estimates, at every passing minute, around 6,000 to 8,000 container ships are traveling across the oceans. With the help of the automatic identification system, these ships can now be tracked in real time. If you visit websites like Marine Traffic or Vessel Finder, you will see the entire ocean filled with tiny lights. Each light represents a massive ship carrying goods worth millions of dollars.
Most of these container ships are vessels that depart from China and travel to Europe and the United States. Surprisingly, each vessel carries an average of 5,000 containers. That means around 40 million containers are traveling across the oceans at any given time. From our clothes to mobile phones, almost everything has traveled in these containers before reaching us. At first glance, everything seems normal. Goods arrive from one side and empty containers return from the other. But the reality is far more shocking and troubling. The balance of global trade is completely distorted. China sells so much to the world that a flood of loaded containers flows out of the country. In 2023 alone, China's trade surplus exceeded $823 billion. That means China exported goods worth $3.38 trillion and imported $2.557 trillion, leaving a surplus of $823 billion. The problem begins when these containers reach the United States or Europe. While China's surplus is $823 billion, Europe's combined surplus is only about $41 billion, 95% less. But when these containers reach the US, the imbalance becomes extreme. The United States is the world's largest consumer, meaning its imports far exceed its exports. As a result, more containers arrive than can be filled for return. Only about 40% of containers leaving US ports go back loaded. So the question arises, what happens to the remaining 60%? You might think they return empty, but that's not the case. These containers end up sitting in junkyards across the United States. This happens because sending an empty container back to China costs around $3,000. On top of that, it takes up space on ships that could instead carry loaded containers worth millions of dollars. That's why China doesn't need used containers costing $3,000, because it can manufacture a new one for around $2,000. Every year, about 2.5 million new containers are produced, and there's no shortage of old ones either. So what happens to the empty containers stuck in the US and Europe? Many are sold cheaply for storage or construction use. Nowadays, homes and offices are also built using these containers. And when nothing else works, they are melted down to extract steel, since each container contains about 2 tons of steel.
The next time you pass by a port and see stacks of steel containers piled on top of each other, remember, this is not just waste, but a unique story of a broken global economy. Now let's move to the question that puzzles even the smartest minds. Why is the United States, despite being the world's largest oil producer, unable to fully use its own oil? On the global map, the US ranks #1 in oil production, ahead of Saudi Arabia and Russia. But surprisingly, it is also the world's second largest oil importer. In other words, it sells its own oil and buys oil from others for domestic use.
There are three major reasons behind this. The first reason is the difference in oil chemistry. Not all oil is the same. The oil produced in the US is mostly light crude oil. It is less dense and has lower viscosity. The problem is that many US refineries were built to process heavy crude oil. These refineries were designed at a time when the US imported thicker oil from countries like Mexico and Venezuela. If the US wants to process its own light oil, it would need to overhaul its refining technology, costing over $200 billion. Instead of spending that money, the US sells its light oil at higher prices globally and imports cheaper heavy crude oil. But oil chemistry isn't the only reason. The second reason is logistics. Oil is produced in one part of the US while refineries are located far away. For example, Texas has vast oil reserves, but there are limited pipelines to transport that oil to the East Coast or places like New York. California has become almost an oil island, where due to a lack of pipelines, it is forced to import about 70% of its oil from other countries. Even these two reasons were enough, but the final blow comes from the Jones Act. During World War I, the US faced a major problem transporting soldiers and supplies across oceans due to a lack of its own ships. To solve this, the US relied on foreign ships, but this created a new risk. What if those countries became enemies in the future? The solution was to build a domestic merchant fleet that could be used in both commercial and wartime situations. As a result, Senator Wesley Jones introduced a law stating that goods transported between US ports must be carried on American-built ships with American crews. However, building ships in the US is 3 times more expensive than in China, and labor costs are also higher. This law eventually backfired. There are very few ships available to transport oil from Texas to New York, and their rental costs are so high that they add about $5 per barrel. As a result, US refineries find it cheaper to import oil from other countries rather than use domestic oil. A law meant to protect America has gradually started harming it from within. These are the strange reasons why the United States, despite being the world's largest oil producer, still depends on others. Now, shifting from America's dependence to Iran's situation, the US has imposed sanctions on Iran for years. Due to these sanctions, Iran cannot buy or sell goods with the US or its allies. Yet Iran's Mahan air fleet includes many American and European aircraft. So how does Iran smuggle Boeing 777s? In 2024-25, Iran surprised the world when 5 Boeing 777 aircraft suddenly appeared in its fleet. This was the result of years of planning. In Alice Springs, Australia, there is a massive aircraft graveyard where Iran had its eyes set on 5 old but usable Singapore Airlines Boeing 777s. Iran couldn't buy them directly, so they were first purchased through a US-based company called Aero Aviation. Then they were sent to China, and from there sold to a fake company called Udon Aviation in Madagascar. These companies existed only on paper to avoid US scrutiny. Once registered under Madagascar's flag, the aircraft were no longer under FAA control. They were then moved to Cambodia, a country with relatively relaxed aviation regulations, where they stayed hidden from global attention. In July 2025, these aircraft filed a flight plan from Cambodia to Kenya, claiming they were going for maintenance. However, once they entered Afghan airspace, where monitoring is weak, they turned off their transponders. After disappearing from radar, instead of going to Kenya, they changed course and landed in Iranian cities like Chabahar, Zahedan, and Mashhad. By the time the world realized what had happened, the aircraft had already become part of Mahan Air's fleet. The US couldn't do anything because all companies involved were registered under fake identities. Today, Mahan Air has around 50 to 60 active aircraft, mostly Airbus, along with about 7 Boeing planes. These aircraft still land in other countries and use their airspace. According to the Chicago Convention, unless countries are at war, they cannot deny civilian aircraft the right to use their airspace. However, due to sanctions, many countries do not allow Mahan Air to refuel. If Europe and US allies block Iranian airlines from using their airspace, Iran could retaliate by closing its airspace as well. If that happens, flights between the Middle East and Europe would face serious disruptions. We hope you liked this Nobles Creations video and will share and support it. Thank you for your kind comments. See you in the next amazing video.